the next witness is Dr. Parsons, who's going to be by video. So 30 minutes, Your Honor. Right.
Court reporter swearing witness.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Dr. Parsons, I'm Brad Gilmore. I represent Gray and Kelsey Mitchell, the defendants in this case. Would you tell the jury your full name, please?
Paul David Parsons.
And are you an orthopedic surgeon in Franklin?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of your resume or curriculum vitae?
Yes.
Is it up to date as far as you know?
Yes.
Let's make a copy of that Exhibit 1 to your deposition. And are you board certified?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means I've completed a level of training and have passed certification exams twice for to be recognized by the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery as competent in practicing and performing orthopedic surgery.
And I believe you mentioned before the deposition started that you'd been practicing about 20 years.
21.
Now, did you have occasion to see a gentleman by the name of Ted Crawford?
Yes.
When did you first see Mr. Crawford?
10/29/02.
And did you treat Mr. Crawford in regard to an automobile accident that had occurred on 10/25/02?
Yes, according to my records, Mr. Crawford was involved in a motor vehicle accident on 10/25/02 in which he stated he was sitting in traffic and was hit from behind by a car going approximately 60 miles an hour.
And am I correct that you don't know anything about the accident other than what Mr. Crawford himself told you?
That's correct.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about your notes. There appear to be some office notes over several visits in October and November of 2002. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are those notes that were generated by you?
Yes.
Were they generated at or shortly after you saw Mr. Crawford on each occasion?
These were done 2 years ago, but my practice is to dictate the note immediately after leaving the exam room.
And are the notes maintained in a file on Mr. Crawford as a regular part of your practice?
Yes.
All right. Let's make a copy of your office notes, Collective Exhibit 2, if we could, after the deposition. What did your physical exam show on the first occasion that you saw Mr. Crawford on 10/29/02?
The exam at that point showed a healthy-appearing 51-year-old white male that wasn't in any acute distress. He could forward flex, side bend, and extend, that is, move his back in pretty much all direction, though it did cause him some pain to do so, but not radiating down into his legs. Straight leg raising or tension signs were negative on both sides. The reflexes at that point, or part of the neurologic exam, showed there was no asymmetry, that is, it wasn't different from one side to the next. His muscular use of his toes, extending the toes, was normal, and there was no evidence on a direct exam. That's poorly worded in the noting, but no evidence of a direct exam of an injury to the foot or ankle or any neurologic deficit.
Did Mr. Crawford have anything objectively wrong when you examined him on 10/29/02?
No, these were subjective complaints.
And for the jury, could you explain briefly the difference between objective findings and subjective complaints?
Yeah, objective is something I can find without any feedback from the patient, some bruise, swelling, deformity, something that's visible or detectable without cooperation or conversation with the patient, whereas a subjective complaint is more a complaint of pain or discomfort expressed by the patient.
Okay. Now, did you take x-rays?
Yes.
And what did the x-rays show?
Showed two areas of fairly severe degenerative disc disease, one at L4-5, which is in the lower back area, and the other in the lower chest area between T10 and T11.
would the degenerative changes that you mentioned have predated the accident 4 days earlier?
Well, these were chronic changes where they're actually visible on x-ray, so they did not represent an acute injury. This is something that had been present for quite a while.
And what was your impression of Mr. Crawford's condition on that date?
My impression was that he was having lower back pain, perhaps some right-sided radicular or nerve pain, probably related to his degenerative lumbar disc disease, possibly aggravated by his accident that he had several days before. And I therefore gave him a shot of some steroidal medication and recommended he take some non-steroidal medication for a while after that. He was also given a prescription for some rehab exercises to learn from a therapist.
Okay. Now, I want to go to the last, one of the last visits that you had. Did you see Mr. Crawford on November the 19th of 2002?
Yes.
Which would have been 3 or 4 weeks after the accident?
Yes.
Okay. You have some things in your note that I want to ask you about. First, you mentioned that at that time he began to complain of left leg pain, whereas he had complained of right leg pain previously?
Yes.
Okay. To a reasonable degree of medical certainty, are you able to say that any of the leg pain that Mr. Crawford had was caused by this accident?
Well, I don't know from a medical standpoint if any of the complaints were caused by the accident. The only thing I can demonstrate is that he does have a cause for his complaints, being the chronic condition in the back. Now, what was caused by the accident or aggravated by the accident, I have no way of knowing.
Okay. And again, the chronic condition, is that something that would have taken a long time to develop?
Yes.
Now, you also mentioned in your notes that, quote, the patient is being very stoic with his symptoms in that when I walked into the room, he was nicely dressed, well-groomed, sitting in the chair with his legs crossed, reading the paper, end quote. Can you elaborate on that for the jury, please?
Well, the reason I dictated that in there is we're dealing with a painful condition here, and there's either he's being very stoic, as I dictated, and tolerating his symptoms very well, or the pain wasn't that great. In that after doing this for 20 years or so, you get accustomed to seeing what a painful condition looks like. Occasionally people tolerate it very well and are very stoic, but more times than not, you can the painful condition is severe, it expresses itself in the patient's attitude in the room.
And did his attitude on that occasion appear to be as a patient would in pain?
Didn't appear to be in great pain at that time.
Okay. The note goes on 11/19/02 to say, I have done my best to educate him, and this is a quote, to what is involved with pursuing this case, expecting other people to pay for it.
I'll object at this point as whether that's really having to do with diagnosis and treatment of the patient.
The note goes on to say, Doctor, quote, I have done my best to educate him to what is involved with pursuing this case, expecting other people to pay for it, in that this may or may not turn out to be a pre-existing condition that is causing his symptoms, and that is certainly not up to me to determine, and I will be unable to determine it based on the medical studies, end quote. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, these are difficult conditions to treat with uncomplicating factors, much less trying to revisit them 2 years later as we're doing today. That's what complicates treatment of these conditions. And that's an important factor in trying to get somebody over this kind of condition. So rather than just ignore that fact, I usually openly discuss it with folks.
Okay, and that fact is what?
That there are other factors involved here. There's going to be, rather than just me and him dealing with the painful condition, there are going to be lawyers involved.
Okay. And so did you have that understanding at the time that he was going to make some type of legal claim?
Well, it was, I don't remember if we discussed it directly, but obviously I thought so, yes.
Same objection.
And then another portion of your note on 11-1902 toward the middle of the paragraph indicates that you advised him that you would be unable to determine whether this was caused by the accident. Can you explain to us why you were unable to determine that?
There was not an acute injury I could demonstrate. The only thing I could demonstrate on examination, radiographically or otherwise, was an underlying chronic condition of the back.
Did you obtain an MRI of his low back?
I know I recommended one, or had no objection to him getting one. I don't think I ordered one.
Well, let me show you
We might
a
have
document and ask you if that appears to be an MRI report.
Yeah, he did have an MRI scan of that.
Take a moment to review that if you need to.
Yeah.
Were the results of the MRI scan that you ordered on Mr. Crawford's low back consistent with the X-ray results that you had seen previously?
Yeah, basically this doesn't show any acute injury. It shows some underlying degenerative, pre-existing chronic conditions. A little bit of arthritis, a little bit of degenerative disc disease at several levels.
Okay.
No acute herniation.
Okay. Was any other treatment indicated based on what you saw on the MRI scan?
Well, certainly no operative treatment indicated. The treatment for this kind of problem, which can be painful, is a prolonged course of therapy and working with the back.
Can that type of degenerative condition be painful in a patient even without having gone through trauma?
Yes.
And when we say trauma, would a car accident be a type of trauma?
Yes.
Tell us why you ordered an MRI when you had already performed the plain X-rays on Mr. Crawford's lower back.
Well, that's the next step, logically, in someone who is not responding to normal conservative measures. You have to take the next step at looking at the soft tissue and see if you can document an undiagnosed injury.
And were you able to document such an injury in this case?
No.
Is an MRI a more powerful study than a plain X-ray?
It's different. The X-ray shows bony anatomy and the MRI scan shows soft tissue anatomy.
To a reasonable degree of medical certainty, would Mr. Crawford qualify, in your opinion, for any permanent impairment based on the car accident?
He may have some impairment referable to the condition that's in his back, but again, I don't know what was caused by the accident or what was not caused by the accident, so I don't know how to attribute anything specific to the accident itself.
Did you take Mr. Crawford off work for any specific period of time?
I don't recall that I did, and I don't see anything in the notes. It's I don't believe he had a physically demanding job, and therefore shouldn't need too much time off work for
Object to the form of
something
lack
along
of
this line.
foundation.
Go ahead, you can finish your answer, Doctor.
I don't see anything in my notes where we discuss that. So I